Hey everybody, it's Hayden, and I'm back with a tutorial that I've been dreading having to make. I didn't want to do this. Today we're going to be talking about supply costs and the effects of terrain on getting supply to your units in the field and to other bases. The reason that I'm doing this today is because lately on my Discord I've been seeing a lot of people mess this up, and I'm the number one person who messes this up more than anybody. Uh, there's so many misconceptions about how supply works in this game and how it gets delivered to places and supply paths, all those things. I mess it up all the time. I'm always getting yelled at by Desert Wolf, you know, about this because I keep thinking things work a certain way and they don't. But I've noticed that other people, less experienced players, have been making the same mistakes, and they could negatively affect your tactical decisions or strategic decisions if you don't have a good understanding of how the supply paths work in this game. You may try to block a road thinking that's the end of it, when in fact there's 20 other ways for supply to flow for your enemy. So today we're going to do our best to talk about supply paths, how supply is moved around the map, basically, and some other little tidbits that you may want to know. I'm not going to get into the entire supply system because to me, it's one of the most complicated functions of this game, and a lot of it is under the hood and not fully understood, at least by me. So I don't want to start talking about three times base supply and how many supply points a unit expends in the field. We're not getting into that. I'm just trying to teach you guys how to calculate supply paths so you can make better informed decisions about how to move your troops. One, so you cut off the enemy's supply, and two, so you don't get cut off yourself. So, a couple references today. We're going to use the game manual and a couple sections. Sections 8.3.1, which is right here, which talks about the actual supply costs, and we'll talk about what that means. We're also going to look at section 15.3, and that's going to be here. How to trace supply paths and things like that. We're also going to use some information from a really great forum post on the Matrix website from a guy named Alfred. He's no longer there for dubious reasons we won't talk about. But before his departure, he gave a lot of great information to people, and I will link this thread into the video description so you can read it yourself and get your mind blown about a lot of different things. I also have this little text document that I pulled out of that whole thread, which has some good information about how supply is delivered and how often you can determine it will get sent to different places. Again, I'm just scratching the surface of this to help you guys make better decisions in your games. So, the first thing I want to talk about is supply paths and supply costs. So, in this game, it costs supply cost to move supply, and that doesn't mean that it costs supply to move it. It means that the terrain and the different features of the terrain change how far supply can move, how often it can be moved, and how it's routed. So each one of these hexes, right, depending on first of all the terrain type and or if it has a road or a rail line, changes the supply cost, and that supply cost is available in a couple places. On certain map mods, depending on which ones you use, it'll have a key up in the top right corner that has the supply cost here. And again, in the manual at section 8.3.1, it lists, let me get to it, hold on. It lists the supply cost for terrain, and also on the next page, how much it costs to go over these primary roads, these secondary roads, the trails, and things like that. You need to know this. It's very important, okay? So now that we know what the supply cost is, how do we figure out how that works in the game? So let's go back in. This map that we're looking at right now is actually an AI game because there's a special feature of this game that's not available to you in a play by email that I want to show you. So let's say we want to figure out how supply can move from one place to another. Like, if I have supply at Rangoon, can it get to Chungking at all? Like, how do I figure that out? Well, in an AI game or an offline game, there's a cool little tool. So what you do is you click on a base hex, right? Because the supply flows from bases. It doesn't flow from anywhere else, but it has to have a base in it, right? Now, if I hit the 5 key on my keyboard, watch what happens. There's a little bit of a delay, so don't be worried if yours takes a minute. You see all these numbers and these orange yellow dots, right? So basically, this 5 key on your keyboard will show you supply paths. Each yellow dot, with the exception of bases, means supply can get there. And the numbers in the below the dots tell you the supply cost to move it there. All right? So if we look at this, the base that you highlight starts at 100, right? Because you start out of 100 points. And as you move through different types of terrain and different types of roads, you see that the supply cost is getting higher, and it's subtracting. And when we get to Chungking, the remaining supply points from Rangoon are 16, meaning we expended 80 for supply cost for supply to move to this place. Now, what does that mean? It does not mean that that's how much supply it is costing you. It means that the calculation for how far supply can go means that out of 100 available supply points to move supply, you've used 86, and you can still keep going. So, for example, from Rangoon, you could theoretically supply this unit right here in the field. Now, you used up almost all of your supply cost to do it. Once you run out of supply cost, you see that the yellow dots go away and the numbers go away. That means supply can no longer flow any further than these places here. But supply will still get theoretically as far as here from Rangoon. So this 5 key is really useful for figuring out supply costs without you having to do the math yourself. But you can do the math yourself, and I will show you how you can and when you might need to. So remember, the 5 key on the keyboard in an AI game shows you where supply can flow from one base to anywhere else on the map, and these numbers are the remaining supply points left as you move from hex to hex to hex. Once you run out of 100, you run out of the ability to send supply. Now, you may ask yourself, well, what does this number mean to me? Well, this means that you've used, for example, at this little base here, Ping Xiang, you've used 99 out of your 100 available supply points to move the supply there. And what does that mean? It means that it's going to take supply a long time to get there. And the manual does not discuss this, but digging into the Matrix forums, we found some references here. So looking at this forum post, there's a guy here. Let me see if I can find him. Apparently he was involved in the coding of the Admiral's Edition game. And he had a WIT-PQS. He added some additional context here, and basically this is how you can calculate how often supply will be delivered to a base or a location. So basically, anything from 1 to 10, supply will only get there once a week. So that supply movement from Rangoon to that unit all the way over there, assuming all the other bases needs are met and there's excess supply to get there, would only get to that unit once a week. If the supply costs were from 1 to 49, it would get there 2 times a week. For a total of 3 times, because this is additive. Like it says, these are actually additive, right? So if your supply cost is only 89 to 100, meaning you only use 11 supply points, you will basically be able to get supply deliveries 7 times a week, because it's 1 plus 2 plus 4. I know this might be complicated. Guys, I'm not trying to get overly involved with this. You come read this post for yourself and understand it. I'm just trying to tell you what this is. Anyway. So, now we know that based on how many supply points we're using, we can calculate roughly how many times a week supply has the capability of being delivered to that unit from that base, or from base to base. It doesn't mean that it's always going to flow in the quantity that you want, because like I said, the supply algorithm is incredibly complex, and there's a lot of other stakeholders along the way that need to have supply too, and they may eat it up before it gets to this unit. I'm just telling you, it is theoretically capable of supply to flow from Rangoon all the way to Pingxiang, assuming there's sufficient supply available to do that. Okay? Whew, that's a mouthful, isn't it? Alright, let's continue. Okay, so now we're actually looking at one of my play by email turns. And now watch what happens when I press the 5 key here. This is actually like 2 or 3 weeks ago. The campaign has moved on from this direction, so don't there's no offset here. Okay, I hit the 5 key, for example, at this base Sin Yang, and watch what I get. Takes a minute. Okay, all I get are yellow dots now. I do not get the numbers. Now, I don't know exactly why that is the case um, for play by emails where you don't get the supply cost, so you would have to do the math yourself. But we can do that if we need to. But the yellow dots are places where my supply can get to right now, where a supply path can be drawn showing me where my supply can go. Okay? So let's take a look at some misconceptions that a lot of players have about supply paths and blocking them and what that does to enemies' ability to supply their troops. Okay, here's an example of me going up the Ankang Road, right? I basically have every hex more or less filled out with the exception of a couple. So I'm going to hit the W key now, which is your hex side detail. Remember, for supply to flow through a hex, it can be contested, but you have to be able to draw lines through the hex sides for the supply to move. So in this case, you see there's an allied unit in this hex here, but the hex sides on the north and south side of this are still open, so supply could flow through this hex. However, if you look a little bit further down here, you see that there's an allied unit on this road, and he owns all 6 hex sides. So supply cannot flow from Nanyang through that road up to Ankang, for example, right? But does that matter? Absolutely not. It does not. Because the biggest misconception that I feel other players make, and I did too until recently, is that the supply has to stay on the roads and the rails and it can't go off-roading. It can't be further from the truth. Let's take a look at this. So assuming we have supply flowing through Nanyang, and I want to get supply up to my troops at this crossroads up here, right? Well, the road's blocked, right? Or I have units in this. They can't go by. I'm out of supply. I'm in trouble. No, not at all. Let's take a look at this. Watch this. You ready? Supply's here. And it can't go here, right? It gets blocked. If we can't go this way, it gets blocked. Where else can it go? Oh, yeah. It can go this way. Just because we don't have a road here does not mean the supply path can't be connected. It just means that it takes more supply cost to get the supply there. Alright? So if I highlight this 6 and hit the 5 key, let's see where our yellow dots go. Aha! Do you see that yellow dots? They go all the way up here. In fact, they go even further if I wanted them to. Because we just basically take a path this way. Since we can't go this way and can't go this way, there is a valid supply path this way. If Helson wanted to make this more difficult, he would put troops here, and then my supply would just have to kind of go around this way, right? And now, looking at that terrain, it could get very costly, right? And that could actually cause me to not be able to move supply that way. We'd have to do the math and figure out if we could. But this clear terrain right here, if we look at our little legend in the top right corner, it only costs us 10 supply points to move that way, right? And then we basically take 10 supply points, and then we're back on a minor road that we own and have all the hex sides connected. And then it just costs us 5 supply points for every hex that has a minor road. And how do I know it's 5 supply points? Let's take a look at that. I bust out the manual here, and I go to the next page. And you see here that a secondary road has a supply cost of 5. A primary road or main road has a supply cost of 3. So let's do some math and figure out how much the supply cost would be to get from Nanyang up to this hex up here with my troops, right? So it started at 100, 90. From here it'd be 85, 80, 75, 70, 65, 60, 55. So that means we would be able to get supply up here up to 4 times a week or 3 times a week. No, it'd be 4 times a week, right? Because if we look at this little note here, we'd be looking at, heck, almost 6 times a week. So there's very little issue getting supply up here, with the exception of we need to make sure that we can supply all the other units in the road. We have sufficient supply to send to begin with. But what I'm trying to show you here is that the supply path is not obstructed just because Helson is on these roads, right? There's other ways. The supply path, you have to know this. If you're trying to block enemy supply, you have to look at this. It's very important. Just getting on a road does not stop it. Let's take another look at getting supply to Sion, right? Helson is in this hex here. He basically blocked this hex here, so other players would think, oh, I can't get supply from Nanyang up here. I'm in trouble. He's blocking the road. Well, it couldn't be further from the truth, right? Let's take a look at other ways to get supply into Sion with knowing that we can't go this way and we can't go this way, right? We even can't go that way. Well, how else can we get there? Let's take a look. So, we'll start with this base here, Loyang. All right, it's the base closest to Sion. I'm going to hit the 5 key on the keyboard. All right, you can clearly see we can create a supply path into Sion. Now, you won't see the yellow dots on the actual bases because, well, the base would be on the yellow dot, and this game doesn't let you layer icons on top of each other. Also, you'll also notice that you can't have a yellow dot on a base where you had combat because there's the crossed swords there, right? But you can see that supply can still flow into Sion even though he's blocking the road here and he's blocking the road there. Let me show you the supply path here. Okay? And there you go. And if you want to do the math, we can figure out exactly what the supply cost would be. Would you like to do that? Oh, great! I'm glad you asked. So let's do that. So we'll turn off the little yellow button, and now we go to terrain, and we also look at the rail features here. Okay. So for once, we start off on WR terrain. So let's write that down. We've got one WR. Okay. We have 2 minor rails. So 2 minor, and the improvements on the hex, for example, the roads and the rails, supersede the terrain as far as supply costs. So even if you're on WR, if you've got a minor rail or a major road, that is the supply cost for that thing. It's not for the terrain, it's for the improvement. You only get into like losing a lot of supply costs when you get into this off-roading stuff here. Okay, so from here we have a rough terrain, right? But it goes into a minor road. So that's another minor road. So one minor road. And then from there, we have a 1 major rail. And then we're into Sion. Okay, which is another, so let's call it 2 minor rails, because you also have the cost, you have to count the cost of the improvement in the hex too. So let's do some math now and figure out what our supply cost would be. And we'll go to the manual now. So we've got 1 WR, which is going to be, I think it's forced rough or something to that effect. Wait, what is WR? I forget. Let me make sure. WR is forced rough. Okay, so that's 20 supply points there. Then we have 2 minor rails, which we'll go back to the manual for. Rail minor, 2 points each. So that's 4 points for those. We have one minor road. One secondary road, so that's 5. And then we have 2 major rails, which is 2 points. So if I add those all up, I get 20, let's see, 29, 31 supply cost to move supply from Loyang to Xi'an. Even though he's blocking this road, he's blocking here, the supply path can be traced. I got hit in the 5 key here. The supply path can be traced this way. And the game will use the easiest supply path it can to determine how to get supply to a base that needs it. So the takeaway here, guys, I know I've been rambling on here, but it's very important. You have to look at the supply paths available to you and your enemy. If you're trying to block a supply route and cut off units, you have to fully block the supply path. If the enemy unit or base can't draw a valid supply path, right, then it is cut off. It cannot get supply, and there's other implications there, especially as it pertains to units that retreat or surrender or get destroyed in combat, because the supply path also matters there. So I hope you understand what we've talked about at this point. The supply cost, looking at the terrain features, looking at roads, and calculating this yourself. You don't even need to have those numbers. If you know the terrain and you have those legends, either both in the manual and here at the top right corner of your map, you can calculate supply cost and determine if supply can reach somewhere, right? And if it can reach there, you can figure out how many times a week the supply can be delivered. All right. So the last thing I want to talk about is calculating retreat paths of the enemy, because even though you wouldn't think it has anything to do with supply, it has everything to do with supply. So let's take a look at that next. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about in this video is how the supply paths determine how you can figure out if a unit can retreat or will surrender or be destroyed. So I want to give Desert Wolf all the credit to teaching me this, because I did not understand this at all. And once I got a grasp of this, it has increased and improved my game tremendously. So let me give you an example. This is December 31st, 1941 in my campaign versus Helsin. This is back when I still didn't have Singapore yet, and I was still working on clearing up Malaya. So one of the goals I had was to trap units in Temalo and destroy them here so they couldn't get away. But I didn't initially know how to do that, so I got a good lesson, and I'm going to teach you now. To figure out if a unit will retreat or not, it has to be able to draw a valid supply path back to a base capable of supplying it. So in this case, if I were to attack these units at Temalo here, for them to be able to even retreat, they have to be able to draw a supply path to another base. And if you look at this map, you tell me what you see. Okay? First of all, I'll give you the hex site details. So for one, this unit is not even surrounded, guys. There's 3 hex sites open to the enemy for them to escape. And this is where the next level strat comes in here. You don't have to surround a unit to make sure you kill them when you take them out. You just have to make sure they have no way to retreat to a valid supply path. So if we look to the north, we see that I have Victoria Point. Everything is sealed off up here, right? There's no allied bases south of Victoria Point or Chumphon, so there's nowhere for these guys to go north. So even if they did leave this hex, where would they go? There's no supply path to the north. Okay, well, what about to the south? Well, he still has Singapore, right? So if this hex site's open, if I attack in Temlo and we defeat him, could he not just kind of do this? Well, no, and here's why. For one, we own the hex site going into Singapore, and 2, if you hit F6 on your keyboard, well, technically that there's a path around this way, right? But if you hit F6, you'll see that this hex is blocked by the ocean. You can't enter the Singapore hex from that side. You have to enter it from the sea that side. The only way to get into Singapore from land is to go through Johor Bahru down that road. So this unit cannot retreat to Singapore. There's no way in. I'm blocking the road into Singapore by owning that hex side. And with that being said, let's go ahead and fast forward and see what happened the next turn when I attacked this unit and defeated it. Let's find out. Boom. Check it out. The next turn, January 1st, we attacked and defeated the units at Temalo, and what happened? They all surrendered because they had nowhere to go. They had no valid retreat path or supply path to retreat along. So they were destroyed. I didn't have to close all the hex sides. I didn't have to fully surround them. I didn't have to do anything like that. I just had to make sure that I denied them a valid supply path for retreat. And that's how you can figure out how to ensure you fully destroy and eliminate an enemy and not allow them to retreat. If your goal is to destroy them and not let them get kicked back into another hex, you have to block the path of supply for that unit. It's critical. And look what it did for me here. I didn't have to do hardly anything here. I just had to enter it and block off its supply paths in other directions. Isn't that cool? So let's take a look at another example. This is Mindanao, right? So this is only January 1st still. My goal here was to get all of his units trapped in Malaybalay and let them die there. Okay? At this time, he still had other supply paths, right? Let's look at this. So his troops in Malaybalay still had supply paths. So let's tell you what, we'll hit the hex side detail here. If I were to go into Malaybalay right now and defeat these units, they could still retreat, right? They would retreat this way because this is a base capable of providing supply to it, and there's an open hex site and nothing blocking him. So look what I did. Let's fast forward a few days here, and I want to show you what my goal was here. Watch. Stand by. I'm going to pause it, and I'll bring it back. Okay, now take a look at what I've done. This is 10 days later. I'm now on Malaybalay. I've pushed all the allied units into this hex. Notice how we only really control one hex site here. He has 4 other places he could leave. But where is he going to go? Because this would be his only supply path at this point, or here. And that is an island, right? So that's no good. And here, he cannot draw a supply path because we own the hex sides and we're blocking that off. So if fast forward to a month from now, for example, if I were to finally defeat these units in Malaybalay, they would just surrender and be destroyed, and they could not retreat despite all these open hex sides. They could not retreat because they have no valid supply path. So my maneuvering on Mindanao was to stop the supply path for these units so that when I do kill them, they cannot retreat, and that'll be the end of it. Again, it has to do with the supply paths and if they can draw one or not. So I hope that this video has helped you understand the importance of tracking and understanding supply paths for not only yourself but the enemy, and you can use it to your advantage. You can either use it to ensure that you lock troops into a hex and when they die and they can't go anywhere and they surrender. You can use it to make sure that your units can stay in supply, and you can use it to cut off supply to the enemy. But remember, it's not just about the roads, it's not just about the rails. Supply can go off-roading. The effect of that is it takes longer for the supply to get to those bases, meaning there's a delay in days of how often the supply can be pushed there. But as long as you have enough supply points to get there, at least once a week supply will make it to those units and keep them in supply. So I hope I didn't make this more complicated than it needed to be, and I hope I've answered more questions than I've created. If you have any questions about these topics, I would encourage you to please come to my Discord and ask us there, or post a comment on this video, and I'd love to try to help you explain it. Again, I don't claim to be the subject matter expert on this, right? There's still a lot of stuff I don't know, but I know enough to use these tools to my advantage. And as you can see in the campaign I'm playing right now, um, we've totally done that, right? We have used this information to ensure that enemies can't retreat and we destroy them in one spot without having to fully surround them. And I used it to my benefit in China, for example, to make sure that even when I see the enemy blocking off these roads, I don't panic because there's other ways for me to get supply to places than those roads. That's all I got for now. I'll catch you guys on the next one.